I want to talk about more and more people who are turning to food banks and are struggling to pay their bills, obviously, as the cost of living crisis continues. But a report which is out, which shows that households collectively are missing out on £19 billion of benefits every year. The report is by Policy and Practice, a software and analytics company, which helps people access support. And it says that families could be missing out on as much as £4,000 a year. Deven Ghelani is that company's director and founder and joins me now. Deven, hello.
Hi, Naga.
Hi. Okay, so the most common benefits people are missing out on.
I think one of the biggest ones is universal credit. It's there to simplify the system, help people to access support by bringing lots of different benefits together. But that means if you're not claiming, you're missing out on that whole web of support together. So that's in terms of value. Universal credit is probably the biggest. I think there's a whole range of other smaller bits of support that people are going unclaimed. One of the most unclaimed is reductions to your broadband bill. So broadband companies offer social tariffs, particularly if you're on universal credit or means tested benefits, but a lot of people don't know about that. And if you think about it, I got my broadband bill through yesterday, £55, quite a lot. If you can halve that, that's like £300 a year. This is not small fry. It's a small amount in relative to the total amount unclaimed, but if you're missing out on any of this support, it's well worth checking.
Indeed. Okay, why are people missing out on the support they're eligible for?
I think the report talks about four main reasons. I think the biggest one by far is awareness. People don't know that they're eligible for support. They don't know the support that's out there, and that's partly because the system is much more fragmented. It's much more complex to know about the whole range of. I work in the field, and it's hard for me to stay on top of the different support schemes. I think another big one is stigma. People don't see it as something that is for them. Even if they were eligible, they wouldn't feel like it was something that they should go for. Another big one is just the complexity of filling in the forms and getting through the process from start to finish. So, we make recommendations on all three of those areas. I think for people that are listening, you can check your eligibility through one of the benefit calculators that's linked to from gov.uk. Generally, they cover the whole range of support that's out there. We run one of them, but there are many others out there as well. For government and companies, local government in particular, you can use your data on people to find out if they're eligible and missing out and proactively let them know. That's particularly true for those in regulated industries as well, who are fairly new to this area. They're introducing social tariffs. But rather than just raising awareness of, say, you could be getting a social tariff for your one water company, we know, for example, Anglian Water and Northumbrian Water, if you're missing out on social tariff for water and sewerage, if you're a joint water and sewerage customer, you used to have to apply for those separately, and actually many people still do, depending on who your water company is. But there's an initiative right now to share data between the two of them. So if you apply for one social tariff, you get access to the other.
And who's in charge of these initiatives? Who's in charge of these initiatives?
I think usually within organizations, firstly, I think in a cost of living crisis, I think ultimately it's the company itself. This should be a board level priority for everyone concerned. And I think we're seeing it go up the agenda. But still, I think the actions that need to be taken, usually there are teams of people that are there to ensure people have access to support through their interactions. I'd make one point. Generally, a concern is that they tend to look at their own social tariff, right? So if you're a telecoms company, your access to broadband. If you're a water company, access to a social tariff. But actually, you should be helping people access not just the social tariff for water, because probably if they're struggling with their water bill, they're struggling with their energy bill, they're struggling with their council tax support, they might be missing out on universal credit or pension credit. So again, those are one of the initiatives that we've helped people to take. Don't just assess people for one element of your support. Help them access the whole range of support that they're missing out on.
So what about local authorities? Because they have the data, don't they? They have the access to I don't know, people's, the electoral roll, et cetera, et cetera. So what can they be doing in terms of initiatives?
I think quite a lot, and quite a lot of them are. So using housing benefit and council tax support data, we know that across London, 10,000 letters have been sent out in the last 3 or 4 months through work with the Greater London Authority to identify people who are getting housing benefit, but we know they should also be getting pension credit as well. So you're proactively letting people know, and we're seeing around half of those people that get those letters go on to take up that support, which I think is an incredible initiative. But you mentioned local authorities, they have the data. I think this should be a national initiative. So there should be other local governments, other combined authorities taking action in this area. But ultimately, I think it's also a government responsibility. And one of the other problems, one of the reasons people find it hard to access this support is because of the fragmentation of the benefit system. We've got universal credit bringing it all together, but in some senses, because you've had shortfalls in support elsewhere, benefits are less generous than they were a decade ago. Companies are having to come up with new schemes. Local authorities have the household support fund to administer, the discretionary housing payments to administer. I'm going through a long list that I know well, but I know very well your listeners ought to know about, but perhaps don't. If they don't know about them, they're not going to. That money's not going to get to the people that need it the most. So there's something about keeping the system as simple as possible and as straightforward to access as possible.
But we've spoken about this before in terms of, or I've spoken about this on this programme before, in terms of making the system simpler. Why hasn't it been done yet?
I think you see it done in some areas. So universal credit does try and bring 5-6 different benefits together. But it's a bit like whack-a-mole. You see this effort to simplify the social security system come up, but partly because it was done during austerity. There was a decision to leave council tax support out of universal credit, which I think, was a crazy decision then. It's a crazy decision now, but that means that people have to know to apply to their council for council tax support, because we've had a big spike in energy bills. We've got people are struggling with the cost of living. You're seeing companies and bills are going up kind of in water as well, and in broadband. You're seeing these different companies come up with their own means-tested support schemes to make sure people can access, can afford to pay their bills. So they're doing something, but are enough people aware of them? Is it getting to the people that need it the most? If they don't try and put all of this together, and it doesn't need to be one giant scheme, it doesn't all need to loop into universal credit, but there are lots of other things, sharing data between one another, like the example I gave in the water industry. I think DWP and HMRC really getting their act together and realizing that people expect this information to be shared if it's going to help them, and taking making the changes to legislation, to regulations, to make sure the data can be shared securely, effectively, but so people can access the support that they need. So
today, hopefully, we may have kind of jolted someone into thinking, you know what, I should take a look at this. I should just think, I'm struggling, or I could certainly do with some more help. Financially, where can they go to is there a one-stop shop where you can just go and say, right, this is what you're entitled to?
Yeah, there are quite a few. So if you search for benefit calculators, you'll get the gov.uk page that links to 3 that have been approved by government. The number of others out there as well. But those 3 should try and signpost you to the range of support that's out there. Policy and practice is one of them. Entitled to, turn to us, or are others. I think as well, the only downside here is that you then need to go on and make the application.
Paperwork.
Which is another example of where you've got another level of complexity. So if our calculator says you could get a lower cost broadband tariff, a lower cost water tariff, you can apply for council tax support. Those are 3 actions that you then need to take. One of the things that we're trying to do is, as I gave in the example with Anglian Water and Northumbrian, is get the data shared between these different organisations a little bit more effectively. And the example of getting pension credit letters out is one of those. So if you're eligible for housing benefit, we let you know that you're eligible for pension credit. We'd love to not have to let you know, just give it you. That would be much simpler. But there are some sensible barriers in place for that, because for one benefit, you don't have all of the information you need for another. And sometimes the sums involved mean you do need to prove that you are who you say you are. But I think you can do quite a lot of work. Some of the work we're doing, some of the work I hope others are doing, to reduce those barriers.
It's been really interesting, and I think very useful indeed. Deven Ghelani, the company's director and founder of Policy in Practice, the company being Policy in Practice. Thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon.